About halfway through this message, you might find yourself saying, man, this sounds tough, like very, very hard to do. I'm not sure I can do this. You might even go so far as to say, I'm not sure I want to do this. Let me show you a verse we're going to get to a little later during our time today. This is 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 17. Peter writes, honor everyone. Love the brothers and sisters. Fear God. Honor the emperor. That verse is tough. It's sandwiched between these verses. This is verse 13. Submit to every human authority because of the Lord, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority or to governors as those sent out by him to punish those who do what is evil and to praise those who do what is good. And then verse 18, on the other side of that verse we just read, it says, household slaves, submit to your masters with all reverence, not only to the good and gentle ones, but also to the cruel. Man, when you hear that, you're like, this isn't just hard. It feels like it's wrong. Like, submit to your cruel masters when you're a slave. It feels like you're being, well, it feels like you're rewarding bad behavior. I've thought about that this week. I want to show you something on a scoreboard. Let me get that set up. When you read a verse like that, where it's like you got to be kind, you got to be gentle, you got to be honoring or whatever, when the others are clearly not, it feels like if we were keeping score and it was like on the one side of the scoreboard is me, right? There I am, me, and on the other side is the bad dude, the bad guy, the bad boss, whatever it is. It feels like when I do what God is telling me to do through Peter, like I get nothing. So at that point in the game, the score is 0. The other guy, he's a jerk, and he gets away with it, right? He gets not only does he get away with it, he gets my honor. Like I've got to treat him well. It feels like the score is 0-1. But you know, if you've been around Christianity for very long, that it doesn't end this way. It's not like we do the right thing one time and we're done. No. The next day, when the guy is a jerk again, he does the thing again, I got to do it again. So at the end of the next day, it's 0 still for me, but it's now 2 for him. Right? And I'm just losing, and this is going to keep on going, as you know, over time. And you're like, dun, dun, dun. Pretty soon it's not 0-2, it's 0-7, right? And it just keeps on going. This sounds not just hard, it feels almost wrong. What do we do with that? We're going to get there, but notice this. Peter didn't start out with the verse that we just read. So let's start where he started, and we'll come back to the scoreboard after a bit. Peter started with the facts. He didn't start with the stuff we're supposed to do. He started with the stuff that God did, the stuff that God is doing, and the stuff that God will do. That's the facts. Chapter 1 of Peter's letter, those are the facts, the things that God has done, the things that God is doing, the things that God will do. And then later on, Peter will move on to the therefore part. That's the stuff that you and I should do. Now, the therefore part is incredibly helpful to us. It's the application that we need. It helps us move from theory or abstract to very, very concrete, and it gives us something to focus on so we know exactly what we should do. So the therefore part of this letter is incredibly helpful. But the therefore part only makes sense when you have the facts part, because the facts are the basis for our therefore actions. Our actions don't start with us. They don't originate with us. It originates with what God has done, what God is doing, and what God is going to do. And then we respond to that. So what are the facts? Quick review of 1 Peter chapter 1. Here's a list of facts that Peter lays out for us. He says, guys, you are the recipients of unbelievable mercy that has cost Jesus dearly. You are born again. You have a guaranteed inheritance. Your soul is being saved. Another fact, God has a hold of you, and he will never let you go. That was the big point we emphasized in part 1 of our series. And then another fact, your suffering, Peter says, that's not random. It's not meaningless. It's not just like sporadic kind of thing. There's no value to it. And it's not random. It's not meaningless. There's a point to it. And secondly, it will not last forever. So those are the facts. So in light of those facts, in light of the fact that these things are true, like true, they are facts, right? This is not opinion. These aren't beliefs. These are facts. In light of all that, there's some things you should do. And so he moves into the therefore part of his letter. And the therefore part is the second half of chapter 1 all the way through probably part of chapter 5. But we're going to focus on chapter 1, the second half, through chapter 4. So in light of those facts, what should you and I do? Here it is. Get your head in the game. He doesn't say it that way, but he's pretty close. Peter says, therefore, this is verse 13, therefore, with your minds ready for action, be sober-minded and set your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Get your head in the game, right? With your minds ready for action, be sober-minded, right? Peter knows what you've experienced, what I've experienced, that pain clouds are thinking. That when we get under significant stress and pain and suffering, we don't think straight anymore. Pain clouds are thinking. And so Peter's saying, listen, you're going to need to think clearly and be ready for action. Keep this in mind. You're suffering. We're suffering. But we're not just victims. There's still a God who's still in control. You're not just a victim. And second, while we're suffering, we're not just victims. We're also not passive. We're not just here hoping, waiting, wondering, right, wishing. We are not passive. Instead, God, through Peter, is giving us something safe, something healthy, something productive to do while we wait for our salvation. We don't sit here wishing, waiting for God to return alone. God has given us something to do, and that's what this therefore part of Peter's letter is all about. So how specifically do you get your head in the game? That's what I want to look at with you over the next several minutes. 4 specifics. Number 1, focus. Say it with me. Focus. Focus. When you're finding it hard to think, don't you need a focal point? Like something to focus your thoughts on when thoughts are like all over the place and scattered. You need a focal point. You need something to focus on. That's where Peter starts. He says, get your head in the game. But you notice the second half of verse 13. Let's look at it again. Be sober-minded and set your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Peter says this, it'd be very tempting, be even normal, to focus on your pain. To focus on how do I get relief? Where do I go? How can I make this end? Do I have any options? That kind of thing. He says instead, focus on what is going to happen to you when Jesus is revealed to the world. So he says, right, set your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Focus on what's going to happen to you then. Right now you're wondering, you're thinking, you're conjecturing what's going to happen to you tomorrow and the next day and that kind of stuff. Right? Focus on what is going to happen to you when Jesus is revealed to the world. This is so huge. We're going to devote one entire part of this series to what's going to happen to you when Jesus is revealed. That's part 5. But let me just say one thing right now. The coming grace that Peter's referencing here goes way beyond an end to our suffering. Like we all go to heaven and we don't suffer anymore. The coming grace goes way beyond that. Second specific. So first was focus. The second is flush contaminants. Why don't you say that with me? Flush contaminants. By this we mean get rid of the junk that's clogging you up, if you will, right? Clogging the pipes, making you impure or unable to have God's love flow through you freely. This comes from 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 14. He says, as obedient children, don't be conformed to the desires of your former ignorance, but as the one who called you is holy, you also are to be holy in all your conduct. Holy, set apart, right? Special. And then in chapter 2, verse 1, he adds, therefore, another therefore statement. Rid yourselves of all, and he lists some things: malice, deceit, hypocrisy, envy, slander. Well, so these are contaminants, right? These these desires, these old fleshly desires, old fleshly behaviors like anger and deceit and hypocrisy and envy. Flush yourself. Get rid of those. Purify yourself. Why? At least 3 reasons he lays out in chapter 2. The first one is this: God is holy. Right? You do it because God is holy. This is verse 14. As obedient children, don't be conformed to the desires of your former ignorance, but as the one who called you is holy, you are also to be holy in all your conduct. For it is written, be holy because I'm holy, God says. A second reason why we want to flush all these contaminants, we want to take things that ruin us or defile us very seriously, is because you and I represent God. We are priests of God. Chapter 2, verse 4. As you come to him, a living stone, this is talking about God, rejected by people but chosen and honored by God, you yourselves, as living stones, a spiritual house, are being built into a holy priesthood to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. And then in verse 9, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood. Now, we could spend an entire sermon on any one of these pieces. Like, what does it mean to be a chosen race? What does it mean to be a royal priesthood? I'm not going to do that here. I just wanted to point it out. You represent God as a priest, and so therefore, flushing contaminants makes sense. Because you're representing God and he's holy. The third one is this: impurity or contaminants. They're toxic. They're toxic. Like, they're poisonous. They're toxic to your souls. This is verse 11. Dear friends, I urge you as strangers and exiles to abstain from sinful desires that wage war against the soul. These sinful desires, there are a lot of great desires and those are awesome, but these sinful desires that you want to flush, you want to not indulge, you want to not indulge them because they are at war against you. They are waging war against your soul. They are toxic to your soul. Now notice, Peter isn't telling them, hey, you guys got to go out and change what unbelievers do. He's telling them not to do what the unbelievers do. That verse, chapter 2, verse 11, when I was in seminary, it was one of the verses that we were required to memorize for one of my classes. And I got thinking about that as we got to this part in Peter's letter. Wouldn't it be great if we worked together, and from our time together in this series in 1 Peter, if we memorized just 2 verses? And so here they are. 1 Peter 2:11 is one of the 2 that I've picked. I would love for us to memorize it. Let's read it together. 1 Peter 2:11, dear friends, I urge you as strangers and exiles to abstain from sinful desires that wage war against the soul. I can't tell you how many times I've started to be tempted. And I get this desire that Satan's kind of pushing the button on. And this verse has come to mind and has helped me to say, no, I'm not going to do that. That is a sinful desire that's toxic to my soul. The other verse I would love for us to memorize together is chapter 4, verse 19. So let's read that one together. 1 Peter 4:19. So then, let those who suffer according to God's will entrust themselves to a faithful Creator while doing what is good. Love for you to memorize those. You can send me a note, office@panamabaptist.org, an email or whatever, and let me know that you're memorizing those. That would be awesome. If you're at an in-person service, I'm going to we'll take some time during our service to read these and maybe practice them together. I think that would be really good and helpful. Back to our sermon. So we're going to focus, right? And second, we're going to flush contaminants. The third one is to fear God and honor everyone. Chapter 2, verse 16. Submit as free people, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but as God's slaves. Honor everyone. Love the brothers and sisters. Fear God. Honor the emperor. Fear God. Honor everyone. Fear God as opposed to fear pain, as opposed to fear people. Most of us, that's it, right? We are afraid. We're afraid of what may happen. We're afraid of the pain coming back, or of the pain that we're already experiencing. We're afraid of what people may do to us, whether they exclude us, or they slander us, or they deprive us of something that we believe we really, really need. And Peter's like, no, don't fear people and don't fear pain. Fear God. And then he says, honor everyone. Honor everyone, as opposed to honoring those who treat us with honor, and then dishonoring everyone who we don't think deserves our honor. Peter would remind us that Christians are so secure in their honor. We're going to talk about this in a later part of the series too. Christians are so secure in their honor that they confer dignity to others. And then in the rest of chapter 2 and most of chapter 3, Peter gives some very practical examples of what fear God and honor everyone looks like. In chapter 2, verse 13 and 14, it's citizens and slaves submitting to authority. Later in chapter 2, it's slaves submitting to masters regardless of how they treat you. In chapter 3, it's wives nurturing a gentle and respectful spirit, not giving into the fear that submission is going to lead to subjugation, right? They fear God, and they're not giving into that other fear, and so they're honoring their husbands. Later in chapter 3, it's husbands honoring their wives with tremendous understanding. And they're not submitting to her authority, but they are submitting to her needs, and they're not giving into the fear that, man, if I treat her with incredible gentleness and I treat her with incredible value, that she's going to get a puffed up head and that she won't obey me anymore. Right? They're not giving into that fear. Instead, they are honoring their wives with this understanding and value. And then later in chapter 3, this is verses 8 to 12, it looks like blessing people, whether they deserve it or not. It's being reminded that we were created to receive a blessing, and we are going to get a blessing from God. And so just passing that on and blessing people, regardless of whether they deserve it or not. These are some practical examples of what Peter lays out, what it means when you fear God and you honor people. Now, I want to go back to that scoreboard thing. So let me get that set back up, and let's talk about that some more. All right, so I'm back with the scoreboard. I said earlier, this isn't just hard. It feels like it's wrong, right? I mean, you got to submit, or you got to give value, or you got to bless when they don't deserve it. You know, you got to obey the government, right? This isn't just hard. Sometimes it even feels like maybe you're rewarding bad behavior. So I want to ask and answer with you this question. Who wins? When you fear God and honor everyone, who wins? Because at the scoreboard that we had before, it looked very clearly like the other guy wins, right? The bad guy wins, I don't win. So who wins? So let me start over and let's add a little bit to our scoreboard. Because it's not just two columns, there's actually three. There's me, for sure. There's the other guy, right? We'll still make him bad. So we got the bad guy. And there's God. There's actually three on this scoreboard. So when I fear God, and I honor everyone, I do it in some very, very practical way. You notice the examples that Peter gave. They weren't like, ooh, weird spiritual activities. I wasn't lighting candles and and doing something weird there. They were very practical ways. They were things like submitting and obeying and praying a blessing over someone, that kind of stuff. So who wins when I do that? Well, when I do that, even though the old nature within me, the flesh within me is like screaming, like, I don't want to, and this is hard, and he doesn't deserve that, but I will do it because Jesus asked me to. I believe and I trust God. When we do that, you know who wins? Right here. God wins. Right? God wins because in the cosmic battle for my trust, I gave it to God. I put my vote, my trust vote, which is a very, very precious vote. I put it into God's column. I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust my other thinking. I trusted God. And so God wins. But God doesn't just win there. When the judgment day comes, and the bad guy that I treated well or whatever, or the bad boss or my spouse or whoever it was that I treated well, when they stand before God, they're going to give God glory because they're going to say, you know what, I saw it on that day. I saw something different. And now I know that difference was caused because that person was a Jesus follower. So God gets glory. God is the one who wins. Let's talk about the bad guy. Because we're so used to thinking it this way. If there's a W in this column, what does there got to be in this column? An L. And to some degree, maybe there is in this way. The bad guy, he doesn't get away with his bad behavior. God is incredibly clear about that. He says, by no means will God leave the guilty unpunished. The bad guy doesn't get away with his bad behavior. I don't punish him for his bad behavior, but he doesn't get away with it. All sins get judged. Let me say it again. All sins get judged. For the Jesus follower, our sins got judged at the cross. Jesus paid the penalty for them all. For those who are not Jesus followers, they don't get away with it. Their sins will be judged. It'll be happen when they stand before the judge. And then they will bear the consequences for all that junk, all that stuff, all that abuse and slander, and right, all that injustice. So the bad guy doesn't get away with his bad behavior. But he does get something special when I fear God and honor him. What he gets is this. He gets a witness that could save his life. See, because when I honor somebody who doesn't deserve it, that's not normal. That's not normal. That is, if the bad guy will listen, that is a shout that there is something different, and that something different has to have a source. And that source is God. I'm not loving the guy because he deserves it. I'm loving him because I'm loved by God, and this is God's will. So the bad guy, does he win? Yes, he does. He gets the honor in the moment, but more importantly, he gets a witness, a difference that he can see, that can point him to the God that he can't see. What about me? Because again, we're trained. There's a W here, there's got to be an L here, right? That's how it works. What do I get? Well, Peter in chapter 3 was very quick to remind us that you are receiving a blessing. You were created to be blessed, and you're going to get that blessing. So I'm going to win. I'm going to get a blessing. But not only, so I'm going to put my W here right there. I win. But I don't only get a blessing. You know what else I get? When I fear God and I honor people, even the ones who don't deserve it, not only do I get a blessing, the power, the control, a fear of people over me, it loses some of that, right? Right? The best way to beat back fear of man is to defy the fear of man. And so that fear of man is weakened in me. And the other thing that's weakened in me is that root of bitterness. When I give a blessing, when I pray over somebody who doesn't deserve it, and I pray, God, would you prosper them? Would you give them exactly what they need? And if what they need is to get caught, then let them get caught, right? But if they need something different, give them that. When I pray that root of bitterness that would spring up into me and ruin me and those around me, the ones I love, that root of bitterness gets yanked out over time. That's definitely a win. So who wins? Yeah. God wins. The bad guy wins. I win. You win when you do it. This leads to one other question besides who wins when we fear God and honor everyone. Do I have to actually honor them? Wouldn't it be enough just not to fear people? That's a great question. I'll leave that to you to think through, wrestle through on your own, or if you're part of a small group or whatever, work that through there. I think that'd be worth it. All right, I'm going to take this down and then we'll finish up our time together. Number 4, take care of each other. This is chapter 4, verse 8. Above all, maintain constant love for one another, since love covers a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without complaining, just as each one has received a gift. Use it to serve others as good stewards of the varied grace of God. If anyone speaks, let it be as one who speaks God's words. And if anyone serves, let it be from the strength that God provides, so that God may be glorified through Jesus Christ in everything. Peter sums up this 4th specific verse. Take care of each other. You Jesus followers, take care of each other. So there you have it, right? Focus, flush contaminants, fear God, honor everyone, and take care of each other. Probably, if you were smarter than me, you would have come up with a way to make the fourth one start with an F as well. I want to wrap up by going back to our don't let go metaphor. In part one, this was the big thing. Peter said, stand firm, and right, this is the true grace of God, stand firm. And I changed the metaphor up to don't let go. And right, God has got a hold of you. I want to get back to that. This week's sermon includes some exhortations to do some stuff. It's very countercultural. Very countercultural, very counter-natural. By natural, I mean to our old nature. Our new nature is fine with it, actually loves it. But our old nature, not so okay with things like, honoring everyone and that kind of stuff. So Peter's exhortation was to us to do some stuff that is countercultural, maybe counterintuitive, counter-natural. But it isn't another burden on my back while I try to pull myself up. I thought of that this week. Is like, if you're there and you're hanging on barely, and you're just, and then suddenly not only you're trying to pull yourself up, but now somebody hands you a backpack loaded with heavy stuff. Like, and I was like, is that what we got here? Is that what Peter's like? Okay. Not only you're suffering. You're barely hanging on because you're suffering. But now I'm going to add some heavy stuff to your backpack to see if you can still hold on. I'm going to now say, all right, now you got to submit to your husband, right? Oh, that's heavy. You're still holding on? Okay, well, you got to honor everyone. You still holding on? You got to be good you got to obey the government. Wow, and these are weights on us, pulling us down. And I was just barely hanging on in the first place. Now you're putting this heavy burden on me too. Like I got to take care of other people too. I can barely breathe myself. And I thought about that this week. Is this stuff, is extra stuff, just another heavy weight on somebody who's already struggling and barely hanging on? And I knew that wasn't the answer because Peter is sympathetic to us. You'll see that so much if you read through his letter. But if you pull this middle section, the therefore section, out of context and you just focus in on, okay, wives do this, husbands do this, slaves do that, feels like yet another burden on my back when I'm just barely holding on. So what's going on there? I've made this statement. These exhortations, they're not another burden on my back while I try to pull myself up. And here's two reasons why. First, God through Peter, God isn't yelling to you and to me who are struggling, just barely hanging on, and saying, pull yourself up. I had visions of, now I've never been in the military, but I've watched some war movies, okay? So that makes me an expert, right? But I had visions of like, you're in boot camp, and there's the sergeant and you're struggling and you're barely hanging on. And he's like calling you sissy and stuff, or worse, right? Suck it up, buttercup, pull yourself up. Guys, I want you to know God through Peter is not yelling to you and to me, pull yourself up. Come on. This is on you. You got to do this. Come on. Pain is just weakness leaving the body. Come on. He's not doing that. God is not saying pull yourself up. When Peter tells us to get our head in the game and focus on the coming grace, I believe that's equivalent to God pleading with us, grab a hold of my hand. You've seen the movies, right? When someone is there and they're hanging on for dear life and stuff, and the person first yells to them, don't let go. But the second thing they often yell is, take my hand, right? And at that point, if the person is going to engage, if they're going to be part of the solution, right? If they're going to take the rescue seriously, they start swinging their arm up so they can get hold and so they can hold on tight. I think these exhortations that God has given to us through Peter is a way for us to swing our arm and to begin to say, yes, I believe I am being rescued, and to swing your arm up and to grab hold of my hand. So number one, God is not looking at you and He's not looking at me saying, pull yourself up. This is on you. Suck it up, buttercup. Come on, quit your whining, quit your wimping, get your act together. That is not what's going on here. God has got a hold of you. But He's giving you an opportunity to grab hold of His hand. The second thing that strikes me about this is this. When you think about God, holding on to us, holding on to me. I want to make this very personal for me. God is holding me tightly. Not because he must, like, oh, I'm God, I got to be good to all the people. I'll be good to you too, Andy. You really aren't a very good Jesus follower, but I'm God and I got to do the right thing. God is not holding me tightly because he must. He's holding me tightly because he treasures me and he loves me. And he is pulling me up from the ledge. And when I reach the top, he will pull me into a tight embrace. Back again to those movies. It's one thing when the heroic stranger, they're reaching down, they're pulling somebody they've never met up. There's something special about that. But that's not your story and my story. God is reaching down, holding you, his friend. It's his friend that's dangling. It's his friend that he's got a hold of. It's his friend that he is going to pull to the top. It's his friend that he's going to make to stand securely, safely past the edge of the ledge. And it's his friend that he's going to hold in a tight embrace. This stuff that Peter exhorted us to do, flush and fear, and honor and take care of each other. That's what you would do if you knew and believed that you were firmly held, you were loved, you're being pulled up, and you are soon to be hugged big time. Then all that stuff Peter said, that makes sense. That's what you would do if it sunk in and you began to believe again. Oh yeah, I'm not pulling myself up. I'm being pulled up by the God who loves me, is saving me, and someday soon will hold me and hug me tightly.